So I made a video on F1's Farce at the Brickyard, so now let's look at when NASCAR, and probably more appropriately Goodyear, screwed up at Indy. From 1919 to 1993, the Indy 500 was the only sanctioned race at Indianapolis. Tony George took over the track and made a push to bring NASCAR to the facility, and in 1994 the Brickyard 400 would take place. The 1994 Brickyard 400 featured the largest NASCAR crowd and highest purse ever. Also, in 94, a record 85 cars showed up to qualify for the 43-car field. Jeff Gordon would go on to win the first NASCAR race at Indy. But to first understand what happened in 2008, we have to go back to 2007. In 2007, NASCAR introduced its new car, the Car of Tomorrow, or the COT. In 2007, the COT raced alongside the previous car, the Gen 4. The COT ran 16 races, while the Gen 4 was used for the remaining 20 races. NASCAR used the Gen 4 car at Indy and not the COT in 2007. In 2008, NASCAR started using the COT exclusively for every race, despite the widespread criticism from drivers on how the car drives. In 2008, Goodyear was struggling to find the sweet spot for their tires. At Atlanta early in the season, Tony Stewart had this to say about Goodyear: "That's the most pathetic racing tire I've ever been on in my professional career. They can't build a tire that's worth a crap." Indy would be a whole different story, though. On July 28, 2008, NASCAR was set to race at Indianapolis for the Brickyard 400 in front of 240,000 fans. In practice prior to the race, it was determined that the very abrasive diamond-grinded surface at Indy was creating significantly worse tire wear than expected. In the first practice, some cars were having issues after only 3 laps, and in the second session, they stretched it to 10 laps. And so, for those unfamiliar with diamond grinding, I described this in my F1 at Indy video, and if I remember, I'll add a card to that video. Diamond grinding is the process of smoothing out pavement by cutting small grooves into the pavement, going in the direction that cars travel. Diamond grinding gives more grip, but it also is more abrasive. The diamond grinding at Indy was done to provide Indy cars more grip, and NASCAR had continued to race there after the repave in 2004 without issues. But 2008 would be different. So Indy has always been an abrasive track, especially at the beginning of the weekend. But usually by the race, the track rubbers up and helps with tire wear. Instead of the rubber being ground into the track like it normally would, it was being ground to a powder. Despite this being the same exact compound Goodyear had brought to the previous 2 races at Indy. These tire issues were really serious as the cars reached speeds close to 200 miles per hour going into turns 1 and 3, and as most tire blowouts typically occur as the car loads up onto the banking in the corners. Unlike F1's situation, everyone was suffering the same problem, as Goodyear is the exclusive tire provider for NASCAR. There was no solution really available to fix the problem outside of getting a different tire compound, which wasn't really an option as Goodyear didn't have enough available tires that they thought were durable enough. Goodyear, however, did bring in 200 sets of tires that were designated for Pocono the following week to be used if necessary. But the problem with the Pocono tires was that they were softer and would probably have been even worse. Teams were given 10 sets of Indy spec tires to use for the race, and the race would go ahead as planned, and the green flag fell. There doesn't ever appear to be anything like what F1 had, where there were talks of teams not racing. But due to the obvious tire problems, NASCAR scheduled a competition caution for lap 10. For those unfamiliar, a competition caution is when NASCAR schedules a caution to come out at a specific lap. This is usually used when it rains the night before or morning of a race, when all rubber is washed off the track. The purpose of a competition caution is to give teams the opportunity to check tire wear if they decide to pit. NASCAR decided to use competition cautions until they deemed the surface raceable and the cars could race safely, but said they wanted to get it to a point where they could put the race in the team's hands. Now, lap 10 doesn't seem that far into a 160 lap race, but they wouldn't even make lap 10, as on lap 4, Michael Waltrip wrecked. Although Waltrip didn't have a tire failure, he lost air on the rear of the car and it sucked around, and he then got hit by Paul Menard. Due to the early caution, NASCAR moved the competition caution to lap 14. Just prior to the competition caution, Kurt Busch's car snapped sideways off turn 1 and collected Kevin Harvick. This would become the competition caution. Despite only 9 green flag laps, Chad Knaus reported that the tires off Jimmie Johnson's car had already started showing signs of cording. NASCAR decided to use another competition caution on lap 32. On lap 26, Dale Earnhardt Jr. had a tire fail while leading. He was able to get to pit road without an issue. NASCAR moved up the competition caution to lap 30. On lap 29, Juan Pablo Montoya had a tire blowout. Montoya would bring out the caution. Jimmie Johnson said he could actually see Jeff Gordon's tires cording as they were coming down pit road. Ryan Newman also had a tire fail as the caution came out. NASCAR would then set another competition caution for lap 47. On lap 46, Mark Martin pitted for a tire issue as his tires were already cording. On lap 47, Carl Edwards had a tire issue, and Matt Kenseth had a tire explode, taking the right rear quarter panel and window with it. These two incidents occurred just prior to the competition caution, and this caution would become the competition caution. NASCAR mandated another competition caution for lap 64. On lap 65, the competition came out. This was the first competition caution reached without an incident. Lap 81, lap 97, lap 122, lap 138, and lap 149 were designated throughout the race as competition cautions. These were all reached without any tire incidents. The only other caution during the remainder of the race was at lap 107 when Brian Vickers' Red Bull lost an engine. The final caution cost Carl Edwards a position as he was making the pass on Jeff Burton as the caution came out. But because the field was determined by the last scoring loop prior to the caution, Burton was given the position back. Jimmie Johnson got the lead on the final round of pit stops. The last 7 laps were run under green flag, and the fans got to see Carl Edwards try to chase down Jimmie Johnson for the win, but Johnson would eventually get the win. The longest green flag run was 13 laps. The average green flag run for the race was 9 laps. There were 11 cautions for 52 laps, meaning that 32.5% of the race was run under caution. If it was needed to switch to the extra Pocono tires, NASCAR president Mike Helton said that they would have thrown a caution, brought everyone in, and switched everyone to those tires. NASCAR Director of Competition Robin Pemberton had this to say: "I can't say enough how sorry we are, and it's our responsibility, being NASCAR, that we don't go through this situation again. The race didn't come off like we had hoped. The fans didn't get what they exactly wanted, and we'll do everything in our power. It won't happen again, I can tell you that much." IMS track president Tony George had this to say: "The problem is solely NASCAR's, and by that, I mean it's theirs to figure out. It's not going to come with anything we do to the track. Figuring it out will only come with getting the car and tire combination right. And that requires actually spending the time and effort to do something about it. The track won't change next year, so if they want to come back, they better figure it out, because I don't think the fans want to come back and see that." The combination of the COT and the tire were to blame. The COT has equal weight on the tires, unlike the Gen 4 cars, which ran different weights on each side of the car to help balance the car out over the run. So because the right side had more weight than previously, it was more abusive to the right side tires, compounded with an abrasive diamond grinded surface. NASCAR also didn't schedule any open testing at Indy, as with previous seasons. Goodyear did, however, do a tire test at Indy, but they only used 3 cars, and that doesn't allow for much data or for the track to be rubbered in. So they probably would have expected to see high tire wear. The high tire wear probably would have set off a red flag with Goodyear, because as I said before, Indy is a really abrasive track until it rubbers in. It is really common for teams to see a high tire wear in the first practice and have it get better over the weekend. Team owners had said that they had been in this position before at Indy, but it usually gets better, and it hadn't in 2008. Goodyear would return twice in 2008 to Indy to test tires. For the first test, it was mostly just to gather data to provide them with information on how to approach the second test. 14 cars took place in the second test. Goodyear said they actually saw a groove of rubber building up on the track and were seeing significant reduction in tire wear. After both tire tests at Indy following the race, Goodyear also said that a contributing factor to the tire issues was that because the COT doesn't rotate the corner as well as the Gen 4 car did, the drivers were driving the corners differently than previous years, and they were sliding the rear of the car across the track. Sliding the rear tires meant that instead of running along the grooves, they were traveling across the grooves in the surface, which created a cheese grater effect. Some people in the garage were saying it didn't matter how conservative you were, the tires would just wear out at the same time. So now, Goodyear did testing, but failed to find the issue. NASCAR didn't allow teams to test at Indy while bringing a new car that had never seen the track outside of the 3 cars that took place in Goodyear's tire test. I think Goodyear and NASCAR both deserve some blame. Goodyear failed to notice tire issues, and while they probably saw high tire degradation in their test, they probably just overlooked it as a normal unrubbered-in, highly abrasive track surface and assumed it would get better when race day came. NASCAR failed to allow teams to test the new car at Indy, and had they done an open test, they probably would have realized that there was an issue. What makes this really disappointing, though, is NASCAR failed to ensure that one of their crown jewel races had the best racing possible. That all being said, NASCAR handled their situation better than F1 and the FIA did. They found a solution that ensured a safe race while still providing the best show they could for the fans. It's important to note that of the 2 tire explosions on Kenseth and Montoya, these occurred on the straightaway and not entering the corner. There was no really hard impact from any tire failure like if one had occurred on corner entry. Ever since 2008, NASCAR has struggled at Indy. Attendance has dropped from 240,000 in 2008 to a low of about 35,000 in 2017. In 2021, NASCAR will enter a new era at the Brickyard as they will move from the 2.5-mile oval that they've raced on since 1994 to the 13-turn, 2.439-mile infield road course. So now, you've heard from me, and now I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the 2008 Brickyard 400? Who was to blame? How have your thoughts on Indy changed since 2008? And what do you think about NASCAR moving to the road course? Thanks for watching, and until next time, so long, everybody.